everyone. My name is Rabbi Cookie Olshein, and I am coming to you from Tempe, Arizona, Temple Emanuel of Tempe. And I want to introduce my co-teacher today, Rabbi Cantor.
I'm Rabbi, who's also a Cantor, Raina Siroty. I'm serving congregation Gemiluth Chassodim in Alexandria, Louisiana. And I'm so happy to see so many willing participants and learners for this morning's first program of the books during the time of the Omer.
So hello. All right. For those of you who may not know what you signed up for, you are invited to participate 7 weeks of study. I'm at 9 a.m. Rabbi Siroty, what time are you there?
It's 11 o'clock here.
And then we also have the nooners on the East Coast. And so if you happen to miss one of these presentations, we are going to be sending out a link to Rabbi Michael Bernholz's congregation. He is sort of the mastermind behind gathering all 14 of us together to teach. He unfortunately, or fortunately, he has a Seder at an assisted living facility right now that popped up on his calendar, so he wasn't able to join us. But we're gonna process through the other parts of our sacred literature. We have chosen 7 different books from Nach, which stands for Nevi'im, prophets, and Ketuvim, writings. And so you saw on the great big list of opportunities to learn what the order was, and I'll try to put that up maybe at the very end of our hour. And we got the lucky draw of the first session. And so we are going to talk about something that I absolutely love, and that is the book of Proverbs. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask everybody in the chat if you would put your name and where you're from, and if you're affiliated with one of our congregations, we would love for you to introduce yourselves and maybe put a word in about why you decided to take this course or just even this session. Just say hello to each other. We want to be relational in everything that we do. And so if you don't mind, just drop a little note in the chat right now, just who you are, where you are, and maybe why you decided to sign up. So I hope to see a bunch of things pop up in the chat. So as we're getting started today, I want to let you know that Rabbi Siroty and I put together this teaching, and we expect for you to participate. So this is not just about what we have to say, but we also want to hear from you. We're going to start with some history, some overview, just to give you some context regarding the book of Proverbs, and then we're going to go into the more interactive part. So we're going to blow through some history if that works for you. I'm a big fan of what I call an instant feedback device. It is called your thumb. And so if that sounds good to you, give me a thumbs up. Just for those of you who have your cameras on. Does that sound like a good plan? I got a few thumbs. Excellent. And a few smiles to go along. So that is great. When we do get to the participatory part of like really digging deep and looking into these Proverbs, where we do hope that you will give your insights and share what you think they mean, we're going to ask you to go to the reactions part of your Zoom screen and actually use the raise hand function. It just makes it so much easier for us when we've got a text up on the screen and when we are hoping that you'll participate. All right, so that's where we're starting from. So Rabbi Siroty, you want to just start? I always call these like the book of Proverbs like these little Jewish fortune cookies. And Rabbi Siroty, you want to give us a little bit of history as we're just going to blow through the history, okay?
So the place of the book of Proverbs in the Jewish Bible is between Psalms and the book of Job in the section called Ketuvim, and is considered part of our wisdom literature, along with Job and Ecclesiastes. And so they are written in this idea that, there's wisdom that comes through these 3 books. And I particularly love the book of Proverbs. I think that there's a lot of things that we are able to learn and we should use it more in our regular literature. And I think that it's a book that we don't get to look at as much as we should, as with a lot of the books in Nevi'im and in Ketuvim. So its placement is based on the Talmudic tradition, and we will find out a little bit about where it is placed in our books, as to opposed to where it is placed in the Christian Bible. Take it away, Rabbi Olshein.
All right. So, one of the things that we think of in wisdom literature is that, it's different from Torah, right? Torah consists of sacred narrative, and it consists of halakha or law. And so this is a really different approach to just teaching us about how to live our lives. And that's one of the things that I love. In Protestant and Catholic Bibles, this is just sort of trivia for you. It's not placed in the exact same location. It's after Psalms, but before Ecclesiastes. And I just very briefly want to teach you a little bit about how the book is divided. Right now, the book is actually divided into 31 chapters. And unlike some of the other books, it's not really based on theme. There were really no divisions. And as some of you know, for Torah, we did not have a numbering system for Torah. That was something that we borrowed back from our Christian colleagues. Said, numbering, that seems like a great way for us to organize it. And that's why we end up sometimes in Torah, at least, with some weird numberings, even in the middle of sentences. You might have a chapter, verses that are 3 sentences in Hebrew, because oftentimes the numbering was based not off of the Hebrew, but off of the Greek. So we have these 31 chapters that were sort of divided up in medieval times, just to give even numbers to the chapters and verses. We've got this 915 verses total, but there's actually a line in Proverbs that says that Solomon spoke 3,000 proverbs. So we have to ask ourselves, where are the other 2,085 proverbs? Where did they go? Well, as we know, that we had an oral tradition and only some things were written down. And so there is the one answer of, well, not everything was saved for posterity. And of course, where you have questions like this, the Talmud often comes to our rescue. And it says that the rabbis of the Talmudic time said that there was actually no discrepancy between 915 verses and 3,000. Because 915 verses give rise to 3,000 different interpretations. So, we can always explain away a little problem like the numbers not adding up. So, Rabbi.
Who is the author? So we attribute the books of Proverbs to King Solomon, and his reign was around 1000 BCE. And he is listed as the lone author of chapters 1 through 24. And as if anyone has ever read or has learned about how there might be different authors to how it's been redacted, the men of Hezekiah, who are lived around 700 BCE, are credited with editing another set of Solomon's Proverbs, which became chapters 25 to 29. And so there are ways that we are able to figure out, based on verbal usage, what might have been written at what time. Because, if you compare, say, the English of Shakespeare to the English of someone who is living in the 21st century, you will notice that we speak differently. The way that we use our verbs are different. The way the nouns are used, even spelling changes a little bit. And so this is why we find some differentiation between some of the chapters of and sentences and verses of the book of Proverbs. So I will let Rabbi Olshein talk a little bit about this Agur ben Jakeh.
And I just wanted to note, we have a participant, Luhact, sent me a direct message and said punctuation was invented around 1100 CE. And so thank you, Lou, for pointing that out. One of our challenges, as many of you know, is that Torah wasn't punctuated, right? And it wasn't even until it wasn't even until after the Masoretes came onto the scene that we ended up with sort of verses and punctuation and how we were going to divide up different parts of the Torah. And so, yes, punctuation was invented much later, and I just wanted to acknowledge Lou's comment to me privately. So we've got a couple of interesting people that have the end of the book of Proverbs. One is Agur ben Jakeh, Agur, son of Jakeh, and he might have been from this area called Massa. Some say that that it was that this area of Massa might have come from one of the different tribal areas. We've got this other king called King Lemuel, which some say his name is translated to mean devoted to God. King Lemuel is the last chapter, chapter 31, but we don't have a record of a King Lemuel anywhere else other than in the book of Proverbs. So what does this mean to us? Well, the people who were redacting and editing and deciding what was in our sacred text and what was out of our sacred text, they decided that he was so important, or at least the teachings that he recorded were so important that he should be in. But they never gave us any clues as to really who he was. So we have another example of this with Kohelet, king of Jerusalem, as being the author of Ecclesiastes, but historical records don't support a person necessarily of Kohelet, king of Jerusalem. So we have Solomon, right, living around 1000 BCE, as we talked about. And I just want to move us up to right here. So it was actually iffy whether or not Proverbs would be included in as a book of the Tanakh, because the rabbis had difficulties with, well, let's just say some things disagreed with themselves. So what became numbered as Proverbs 26 is important. It says, don't answer a fool according to the fool's folly, lest you become a fool, right? And this is where I say that this is like Jewish fortune cookies, right? A lovely statement that says, don't answer a fool according to what they're saying, lest you also become a fool. But right after 26:4 is codified as 26:5, which says an exact opposite of what the verse before just said, the proverb before. It says, answer a fool according to their own folly, lest the fool become wise in their own eyes. So we have a literal contradiction from one verse to the next verse. So what's the problem? Well, some commentators avoid these contradictions when the verses actually contradict themselves by interpreting them to refer to different topics. They say, well, 26:4 refers to one thing, but 26:5 refers to something else. And so there was this commentator, Gersonides, that says to answer this as following. He said, oh, goodness, excuse me, there we go. Gersonides tells the reader not to answer the fool when the fool discusses minor matters, but of course you answer the fool when they attempt to deal with science. And some might say a major matter, right? So it says, think about what the fool is saying first, and then make the decision about how you are supposed to respond. Now, I'm just going to throw this out. Anybody here have that experience where you have to make a decision? Are you going to respond to something that someone says is foolish? Right? And how do you decide? Well, oftentimes we let the minor things go, but we say, I got to stand up and I've got to speak up when it's something major. And as Gersonides said, like science, which is really interesting. I got a comment here that says all the time this issue comes up. So it's not just me, right? Raise your hand. It's not just me. It's not just me. All right. So the rabbis decided that the book itself, one of the big issues was whether or not these little nuggets of wisdom were considered secular or not, and should they be included and be part of the codified Tanakh at all. And what the rabbis decided was that the Proverbs were completely Jewish, in that this tells us how to live our Judaism. I think that's a big key as to why we should study Proverbs. All right. Rabbi.
And also, they're little tidbits that you could carry around with you. And, I think, and they were very easily transportable. as something to be able to share with others,
Mhm.
which is, why we see Proverbs written down on, greeting cards and, little sayings in, places and magazines and things. So they're good things to think about.
So here we go. We are going to continue living Judaism through Proverbs. The theme throughout is that wisdom is rooted in God and foolishness is kin to wickedness. So throughout our Proverbs, we talk about wickedness. Why was there such a focus on wickedness, do we think? This would be, again, the interactive part of today's discussion. Why do you think there was a focus on wickedness? You can raise your hand by going to the reaction section. Everybody got shy. Thea Weiss from Tempe Emanuel. Why do you think there was a focus on wickedness?
Because wickedness is different than bad behavior. Wickedness to me is the bad apple that spoils the whole bunch. And when you live in a society together and there is wickedness, it can affect the entire society.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. And there is a piece here I want to add on. Wisdom and folly relate to divine judgment. God rewards good and punishes the wicked. Anne, you raised your hand.
It's hard to follow Thea. She's pretty wise. The thing that came up to me first was wickedness. To me, kind of means sin. There's like an evil content, not just a misaction.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that when we think about how sin spreads through society, right? If one person gets away with a little bitty sin, the concern is that, well, then the next sin is going to come and the next sin is going to come and the next sin is going to come. So when we think about the sociology that was built into the halachic system, right? It was about preventing even minor sins so that things don't grow and don't spread. So when we look at this, this issue with regards to God rewarding the good and punishing the wicked, we have a problem today with respect to Reform Judaism and modern Jewish thought. And that is, well, I'm not a big fan. I don't know about you, but I'm not a huge fan of reward and punishment theology, right? And indeed, we are taught that, we have the Yetzer Ra, the evil voice, the evil inclination on this shoulder, and we have the Yetzer Tov on this shoulder, the good inclination, and that each of us has, I hate to say it, a little bit of Ra, a little bit of badness in all of us. And our job as human beings is to overcome this voice that says, go ahead, yeah, just press the gas pedal, run the red light, there's nobody to see you, versus, oh, you should stop for the sake of human beings, right? You never know what might happen. You need to follow the rules of society as society has agreed to them. And so we are not big fans nowadays. Most of us are not big fans of reward and punishment theology because indeed, sometimes it appears that bad people never get punished and it appears that good people are always punished.
And also, when we think of when we compare this to the other books and this message that God rewards the good and punishes the wicked, we read that all throughout Tanakh. We hear it from the prophets. We read about it in the book of Kings, because that's the cycle that the Israelites sin. God gives them a king to help them bring them back into the right direction. They get on the path of goodness, and then they fall right back into the cycle again, and they do wicked things. And so this particular God rewards the good and punishes the wicked, we have been hearing for a long, long, long time. And one of the things, with respect to Reform Judaism, as Rabbi Olshein said, is that we this philosophy, we don't see that as much, because we do see people that are wicked that don't get punished, and we see people that are very good that don't get rewarded.
And I dare say, just to finish this little section off, that in post-Enlightenment theology, we are much more interested in being God's partners than we are being God's subservient to God, many of us. And so it is just not something that we focus on, but there is such wisdom. So let's actually look at some of these Proverbs. And again, this is going to be part where we're very curious to hear what you have to say. We've grouped them by themes. So we're going to start with relationships between God and man, God and humankind. And then we're going to work through some relationships with families. And then we're going to talk about traits of man and interactions with others. All right. So get those reaction buttons ready. We want to hear from you. So Proverbs 15:3. The eyes of God are everywhere, observing the evil and the good. So what are your thoughts on that? How does it make you feel? Do you feel watched? Yeah, Lou, I see your hand is up.
I've read many times the book of Jonah, and I always thought that that's a clear example of you can't run away from God, even in the belly of the whale and the bottom of the ocean.
God is with you everywhere.
Yeah.
Watching. Yeah, thank you. Tiffany, and then Andrea, and then Anne.
I think it makes me feel like more supported, like whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, it kind of gives me that person to bounce an idea off of.
Beautiful. So being in relationship with God, however you define God, gives you support and a space to process. Beautiful. Thank you. Andrea Matthews, and then Anne.
Hi, I look at it as this could also be our conscience. So our conscience is constantly observing evil and good, trying to keep us on the straight and narrow.
Yes, the straight and narrow. And every human being falls off the straight and narrow. We call it on the derech, being on the path, right? And when I'm teaching Teshuvah at the High Holy Days, I often think of it as like, okay, I'm on the good path. And then, ooh, something shiny over there distracts me from being on the good path. I make a big old left turn. And then wait a minute, I got to turn around, right? Do Teshuvah, literally to turn around and get myself back on the path, right? So that I can go forward. So yeah, thank you, Andrea. Anne, and then Shelley, and then we'll go to the next one because we got a bunch of these, and I'm hoping that you'll participate and give us your thoughts throughout.
I was pretty much on the last thing that was said, but my thought was once we internalize God's essence, that is a conscience. You don't need, like, I know I've heard somebody got a good angel, a bad angel. A Muslim friend of mine told me that once, and I thought, oh, that sounds really familiar. And so I think that's how it's taught at a certain age. But I think as you progress in post-Enlightenment philosophy, I just wrote that down, that it's internalizing of God's wishes, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And Shelley?
As a young teen, I ate cotton candy on Passover, and that was not allowed. And I was certain that God saw me and I was going to be punished because God punishes the bad and the evil. So there's a negative to this piece also. It's not all positive, depending on the way you approach what you think God is and how he deals with us in my relationship with him. I'm not there anymore, but I really thought that that was the end of me or my family.
Well, look, the reward and punishment piece of this was so challenging to the early reformers that even in what we think of as the Shema, they took out the reward and punishment pieces of it, that, you'll get rain in the right season if you do everything God says, and you are not going to get rain, meaning you're going to starve if you don't. And yet there were good people, I'm sure, that had droughts, right? And why should the collective punishment piece as well. So,
and also with this, sorry, Rabbi Olshein.
Keep going.
So, also it's, I think of when I see this particular proverb, I think of the message that I sent to my 6-year-old son, that, I don't want him to fear God, but I want him to know that God is everywhere. And observing the good things the evil things that he might do and the good things that he's doing. So, because we don't want to create a feeling that there's so many verses in our text that talk about the evilness of God's wrath on the people, and knowing that God is also seeing what is good reminds him that God is seeing both sides of him.
So why don't you take the next one? Proverbs 16.
Sure. So Proverbs 16:4. Everything that God made is for divine purpose, even the wicked for an evil day. So does anyone have any thoughts on this particular proverb? Andrea?
I feel strongly that you have to have evil in order to know good, and you have to have sadness in order to know happiness. If life was a continual bowl of cherries, we wouldn't appreciate it. We wouldn't know it was wonderful. You have to have that contrast.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very Musar statement that you just made. We have to have this balance. Okay, Nancy.
Well, this proverb really unnerves me because it reminds me so much of people who say everything happens for a reason.
Mhm.
Well, it doesn't. And this sense of fatalism can be very destructive to I was going to say to a full life, to anything, to everything, unless people have a sense of agency. And my problem with this proverb is it sort of takes away that agency.
Nancy, I'm going to jump in. How much do you love the book of Job then? I'm guessing not so much. Just so you know, I don't like the book of Job because of those exact issues, right?
Yeah, but it's beautiful literature.
It is beautiful. Absolutely. Absolutely. But it also bothers me. Like, I don't want to be anybody's play toy, poking, be poked at. It's a big challenge.
Okay, so Chrissy and then Jeff.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. It makes me think about, honestly, things like protests. Like, they can't all be peaceful protests. The first Pride started with a riot. And that could be seen as wicked, but it is also something that's necessary.
Beautiful.
That's very true.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
And Jeff?
Should we out you as one of our teachers during
Yes, exactly.
another section? This is Rabbi Goldwasser.
So you have not put your title. Please share some wisdom.
You can let me be incognito a little bit.
Nope, not allowed.
Today I'm a student. I just jumped onto the Zoom meeting, so I don't know if something like this has been said, but I tend to see verses like this as an acknowledgement of what I see as Judaism's radical monotheism. There is only one divine force in the universe. There is no some other evil god, as other religions have. I mean, they knew quite well in the ancient world that Zoroastrianism posited sort of the good god and the evil god, and Judaism radically refutes that idea and says the God who is our God is the God of everything. So everything is a reflection of the divine will. Even things that appear to us as being evil are a reflection in one way or another as a reflection of the divine will, whether we understand it or not. And we're not capable of understanding everything, but we should see everything that exists as being a reflection of God. There is no alternate God out there who's making the bad things happen.
Very nice. Thank you, Rabbi Goldwasser. David, you have also raised your hand.
How do I raise my hand?
Marilyn, hi. We were going by the electronic ones. We'll do better to keep watch out for you, people like you who are raising your physical hand.
Oh, sorry.
You want me to go?
Yes, Marilyn, please.
Oh, I just love exactly what Rabbi Goldwasser said. I love it, love it, love it. We don't understand, quote unquote, what the wicked is. I'm real curious about what an evil, how that would, what the real translation is of an evil day. I'd love to know what that is. But there's one that Adonai is in everything and every place and everybody. And we don't understand some of it that looks wicked to us. I agree. Thank you. Thank you. What's the translation for an evil day?
I'm pulling it up right now, but keep going with Mr. Wiley and I'll pull it back up, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Hey y'all. Hey, I was, when it comes to the everything God made for a divine purpose, even the wicked, I think of Joseph and the things he went through, and even though they were bad and wicked, into slavery, and God always works it out for the good. And we don't like the evil, and it's not his intent for us to have to. He gives us grace, and he's there to help us through. And as you see with Job, you get double for your trouble, triple for your trial. So even in the midst of the bad, God always shines through, and it makes the bad seem minute to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we have, I'm still pulling it up. Better a little with righteousness than great income without justice. Better a little with righteousness. So for me, this talks about prioritizing which, right? It talks about righteousness over money. Righteousness over money. And I want to ask, how many of us have experienced that challenge? And I see, Joanne, you've got your hand up.
Basically, it's fairness to me, what this means. And it means not doing bad things to other people, basically, not taking advantage of other people, living in integrity and living in the right way and taking care of things. And you can take care of business and do the right things. It's being conscious. It's like being environmentally conscious nowadays. If you're going to invest money in something, invest it in something that's going to help humanity and not hurt humanity or not take advantage of humanity. Even if you're going to make a quick buck, that's not what this is about. And justice, to me, again, it's about fairness.
So our challenge, though, becomes how is it that we apply this to our lives, right? So better a little with righteousness than great income without justice or righteousness. Anybody want to share just maybe a brief example of that? Thea.
So a little bit of example. I used to make a fair amount of money, and that was fine. And then the recession hit, and then I didn't make so much money. And then I started teaching religious school at Temple Emanuel. And although I stress about money, the reality is the joy that I get out of the little righteousness of teaching, which is a great righteousness, is worth more to me than the money that I made when I made a lot of money. And it's about, I think, paying attention to what your gifts are and not chasing the idol of the almighty dollar. And look for the righteousness. I mean, as I mentioned, I teach and I tell kids, look around. If you keep your eyes open, you'll find little mitzvot to do. And when you do a little mitzvah for somebody else, even that you don't know, like holding the door open for an older person, your heart smiles a little. And that's a lot more valuable than working for just money.
And it doesn't cost us anything to make those choices, and knowing that we're not going to be financially rewarded for them also is an important part. That the reward comes, if we read in Mishnah, Elu Devarim, it says, these are the duties the things whose worth can never be measured. And it gives us this big, long, giant list of things that we're supposed to do. And it says for traditional Jews that the value will be shown in the world to come, in the future. We don't teach that necessarily to children. We say, do what's right because you're supposed to do what's right as Jewish people, right? Not for any reward. Hopefully we're teaching our children that. Let's keep going through. And remember, this is the relationship between man and God section. And so this next one in 21:3 says, the doing of righteousness and justice is more acceptable to God than sacrifice. For those of us who love studying the prophets, this is probably my favorite proverb with respect to social action and social justice work, right? The doing of righteousness and justice is more acceptable to God than sacrifice. And this proverb, it's even more clear, I think, than the prophet Micah, who says, what is it that God actually wants from us, right? To do justice, to walk humbly with our God. What does God want us to do? To behave properly, to treat each other with respect and dignity, and to lift everyone up, right? That's really what this teaching talks to me about. Any thoughts on this concept of sacrifice that you might want to share?
Mm-hmm.
Tiffany.
I think it shows that it's like you are the ultimate sacrifice, like what you do with your time, what you do with your day, and what you do for the greater good of everything around you. So it's like, it's more important that you're continuing to keep the community going and life going around you, and you're willing to sacrifice your time and your efforts to do that, than to make like an actual sacrifice.
Perfect. Just beautiful. And the last one of this section, rich and poor have met together. God has made them all. What should that teach us about humans in our relationship with God? Joanne.
Mm-hmm. To me, this is that God has made all of us. So it doesn't matter whether you're rich in money or rich in whatever it is, or poor. We are all children of God. We are all one human family.
So this is sort of a restatement of the concept that God makes us all in God's image, right? In a way, that every single human being is made in God's image. And what is our job as human beings here on earth? It is to make certain that every human being is treated as though, because we all are made in the image of God. So let's talk about relationships in families. Rabbi Siroty, you want to pick this one up?
So in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 4, a virtuous spouse is a crown, but the one who brings shame causes the spouse's bones to rot. Anyone have any thoughts on that particular verse? makes you think of your relationships and how you might speak to your spouse.
This one usually gets a lot of commentary when I teach it. Tiffany.
I think it's a reminder to be careful with your words, because like sometimes you'll say things and like, I mean, I've said things to my husband from like when we first met 7 years ago, and I can always tell what hit him hard that I said, because even if he doesn't bring up the whole thing, he'll mention like part of it. He's upset or sad at me. So it's always, you have to, if you're not careful with your words or your actions, then that's going to just sow just that seed of rot into your relationship.
Yeah. Sue.
Yeah, I pretty much repeating what she's saying, though. I think that one of the most destructive things for especially young people when they get married is I see them I hear them bad mouthing their spouse with especially with girlfriends. They get together and they all do this gossip thing, and it kind of poisons the relationship. There's a negative energy there, and then they go back and it enhances all those the little things that may annoy you about your spouse, but when you give word to them, when you put them out into the open, it seems like, I mean, even though they don't hear you talking about them, it's like they're out there, and that's that version of shame, gossip, and the feathers, and the whole idea that you're spreading bad words, and it increases the bad feelings. I just feel strongly about that you respect your relationship in a different way.
So it's very interesting, when we look at different translations of verses. So looking at the JPS, and the way that JPS actually translates this verse is not as balanced as to what spouse they're talking about. And so I wanted to share that. So JPS translates this verse as, a capable wife is a crown for her husband, but an incompetent one is like rot in his bones. So, again, when we talk about how especially wisdom literature is translated by different people, that translation kind of puts this on, turns it on its head a little bit, and it's talking about, it's that it's not even about about shame as much as, saying that she's incompetent. So, so one of the things, that's great about having different interpretations of Proverbs is that, I like this. I think this is a much better way of translating this particular verse.
Anne, and then David, and then we'll move to the next one because everybody loves the ones about grandchildren.
Yes.
And
in regards to what I think Sue said about, bad mouthing your husband, I listen to a lot of stand-up comedy, and I don't know, I think most people know to be a stand-up comedian, you can't come from a really happy household. You have to have some kind of trauma to have humor. So anyway, I was listening to this woman recently, she's pretty famous, and it was about her relationship for her husband for like more than the hour on Netflix. And I said, there's no way in hell that woman can still be married to that man that he hasn't divorced her. So I looked it up online, and sure enough, there was a recent divorce after that Netflix special. And I've watched this happen, like even on Home and Garden Channel years ago, there was a couple that had like, I don't know, I think they had 7 kids or 5 kids all at once, then 2 other kids. And the woman badmouthed her husband on every single one. And then it became, history. So you can see that on TV all the time.
yeah, thank you. Yeah. David.
Yes, ma'am. I know with, as a husband, when my wife, she's excellent. Is she perfect? But when, whether it's working alongside of me as a helpmate or with the kids or just her being her, she is, it is, I couldn't imagine any other. I've seen friends who have not been so blessed. And I guess back, like you said, the spouse, it goes both ways. I can be a blessing, and I can be a rot but I know just me personally, my wife, that crown is what I see with her. And it's just, I don't know, I'm just very blessed beyond measure, as you could say.
Well, thank you, David. I just wanted to share one thing before we move on to the next one. And that is, shame is usually public. It can also be private, but one of the things that we at Temple Emanuel are striving to do is to normalize mental health care. And, rather than, as someone said earlier, kind of bashing one's spouse to their girlfriends or whoever to cause shame to them, the appropriate space for that is in a therapist's office, our counselor's office. And so I just, following up on what Sue said, we to fix relationships, that requires a lot of hard work. And yes, I know people need to blow off steam, but hopefully where they blow off steam is in a private, sacred space of hopefully a therapist's office. That's a space hopefully that will minimize shame, causing shame to one's spouse. Thea, I think you're next, and then we're moving on to grandchildren.
Very quickly, I love what Rabbi Siroty said with the different translations. So I went to Sepharia, which is the JPS translation, and it is as the rabbi spoke. But then I went back and I dissected the Hebrew.
Yes, they'll allow us to go out.
And it doesn't say virtuous. It says capable, and as I interpret the Hebrew, but we lose something when we read a translation. And as a teacher of Hebrew, I always like to go back to the words and pull them apart. And I see Rabbi Siroty shaking her head because, Hebrew is our language. And some person's interpretation, and when I teach, I'll bring out 7 different translations of the same sentence. And I really love studying with rabbis who know Hebrew way better than I do. Just saying.
Yes, and if we had done a 6-hour session on the book of Proverbs as opposed to a 1-hour session, believe me, we would be doing that. So thank you, Thea, for your
I completely understand the limitations. It's just that I don't like, and it's usually men's interpretation.
Well, you'll notice that the interpretation that I brought us is a modern interpretation, and that was intentional. So thank you. Yes. All right. So grandchildren are the crown of grandparents, and the glory of children are their parents. I don't even know if I need to ask if anybody has any thoughts on this one. Grandparents, anybody out there, raise your hand if that makes sense. And if you were ever a grandchild, this one certainly makes sense, right? Yes. All right. I got some nodding heads. I want to move us forward because of time, and I just, we picked too much to try to bring to you. So this one's a sibling sinned against is harder to be won over than a fortified city, and such quarrels like the bars of a castle. Anyone here have a challenging sibling relationship ever? My brother didn't speak to me for 2.5 years once because I refused to let him, 2.5 years, did you hear years? Because I refused to let him drive my car when I was away in college. 2.5 years, he refused to speak to me.
And this rabbi's an only child, so.
So siblings sinned against. My father, just as an aside with respect to this proverb, my father once pulled me aside and he pulled us both aside separately and then did it together. He said, someday your parents, your mom and I are going to be gone and you're going to be the only two people you have left in the world for each other. So you better fix this right now. So Sue, thoughts on this one?
Just a comment that Rabbi Dean Shapiro, our previous rabbi, he comforted me, letting me know that the Torah is filled with and the Tanakh are filled with difficult sibling relationships, because I've had difficult sibling relationships, and that our stories are just full of that, and this one really speaks to me after struggling for years. My brother and sister didn't see each other for 39 years. So it was that. Yeah, definitely. This one's a good one.
Harder to be won over than a fortified city. Yes. Rabbi Goldwasser, then Marilyn.
Well, just a thought on this. My grandfather and his brother didn't speak to each other for the last 30 years of their lives. They're both long gone now. But I'm looking at the words in the Hebrew, Vriach Harmon, like a fortress, the bars of a fortress, like a prison. It doesn't just imprison the two people who are in strife with each other, it imprisons the entire family. So I like that image in the Hebrew.
Thank you. Yeah. Marilyn? You are muted. Famous words of this decade. You are muted.
You are muted.
Again. I think it's important to realize, this is my thoughts, that as we grow up, it's important to find out who has our back. And sometimes it's our family member. Sometimes our family members are not the people that have our back. And it's not that we push them away or beat them over the head with a bat, but there are many other people in the world that we can bring in to be our family. And it's a hard thing to do. Blood doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, make us a family in the end.
And we have many created families, many of us, thankfully. Thankfully, many of us create families. All right, we're going to zip through some of these, unfortunately, because of time. Rabbi Siroty.
Okay, so let's go. Let's look at the let's go to traits of man and interactions with others. In 11:17, the kind person does good to the self, but the cruel cause trouble to their own flesh. Anyone have any thoughts on that particular verse?
So anybody ever hear? Oh, Colleen. Yes.
Colleen and Ann.
Yeah, I think it's possible through being cruel to yourself or cruel in your thoughts to poison your own mind and limit your own ability to perceive or be aware of a different perspective that would be more healing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Anne?
You know, there's an old saying, I don't think it's a country western song, but you only hate the ones you love. And I think we all live so close together. And some families are all alike, and some families, every person's different. And, you know, that causes conflict. But your friends are people you pick because they have things that are similar to you or opposite from you that kind of fill you in that different direction. But your family, they're just there and you're stuck with them, if you want to put it that way. But they can be your greatest allies, you know, if you can work it out.
Thank you. And Chrissy?
Yeah, as somebody who has some mental health issues that cause me to be cruel to myself, I think that in a lot of ways that is a much more impactful thing than if somebody were to tell me like, oh, you're stupid or like that, you know. So you have to be kind to yourself first.
That's right. So one of my favorite things to teach about is love your neighbor as yourself. It starts with an assumption that we love ourselves first. And oftentimes, if we were to truly treat our neighbors the way we treat ourselves, the world would even be more crazy, messed up than it is.
Very, very true.
All right. So we're gonna wrap up. I'm just gonna read a few of these to you, just some favorites. And then we're gonna wrap up today with Mort sent me a private message. The answer is in the next proverb, 11:18. So I'll do that one. So a wicked person acquires a deceitful wage, but the one who sows righteousness receives a true reward. Yes. Yes, absolutely. This is a favorite of mine when talking with teenagers. According to one's intelligence, should one be praised? A perverted mind should be despised. So, you know, there's a lot of raising up of individuals in this world who are not necessarily being raised up because they're scientists or teachers, professors, innovators, entrepreneurs, but for other reasons. And so, you know, according to one's intelligence, so should one be praised. Better humility with the poor than dividing up the spoil with the proud. How should we spend our time and with whom? A wise mind makes one's mouth speak intelligently and adds learning to one's lips. So again, intellect and wisdom are being praised here. This one in 1624, pleasant words are like honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing for the bones.
Again, a very good greeting card one.
Yes, perfect. This is a favorite of mine since I started going silver/white when I was 18 years old. And this was a favorite of many of the sweet ladies that I used to work with when I lived and worked in Florida. The gray-haired head is the crown of glory. It will be found through the way of righteousness. So apparently I started earning my gray hair when I was 18, as opposed to later. And then last but certainly not least, as we prepare to wind up, the last one, rarely go to your neighbor's house, lest they get tired of you and hate you.
My grandparents used to say when they would turn around in someone's driveway, you know, they would go, you know, Merle, don't put up the coffee pot. I'm not staying long. So that's what I always think about, you know, well, especially when I turn around in someone's driveway, but like, you know, and, you know, for those neighbors that, you know, find it more often times when they come over to borrow a cup of sugar and stay for 3 hours.
Tiffany, you're going to have the last comment here.
Just a funny story. My grandma has so many grandkids and so many children and then so many friends and families that sometimes she'll just close her curtains just so that nobody comes over, because everybody comes over back to back to back because there's just so many people.
I love that. I love it. So a couple of things I want to just make sure to say thank you to Rabbi Siroty. I want to thank you to, we have some colleagues that were on today. We made the decision to make this very interactive and less lecture style. And so you're going to get a lot of different styles of teaching from the next 12 teachers that you have during this series. Next week, I'm just pulling up next week's teachers, but my internet.
I'll get it if I could find it.
Here we go. I got it here. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to share. So next week, you have the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. Rabbi Michael Bernholz, again, he was the chief instigator of doing this from Temple Beth Shalom in Vero Beach, Florida. And then also Rabbi Bina Wing from Temple Beth El in Rockford, Illinois. Please encourage your friends to...
Who is also on with us this morning.
Oh, Rabbi Wang, wonderful. Well, so again, you've got 14 different styles of rabbis, and so I'm excited to hear and see what comes next. We want to thank you for being interested in learning. Please share with your friends, and we're going to stop our recording now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us, and
Thanks for
Chag
participating.
Sameach. And if you're
Thank
eating
you.
pizza tonight, wonderful. If you're eating pizza tomorrow night, that's great too.
And to my Temple Temple Emanuel folks, please, we have our online and in-person Yisker service at 11:45 if you're interested. All right, everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Chag Sameach.
Yeah.
Thank